Our Lady of Lourdes in southern France is the site of 70 medical miracles recognized by the Catholic Church.
Saint Bernadette is one of the most popular saints of the Catholic Church.
View a Catholic nun's body that appears to show no signs of decay.
According to scientific estimates, an average body begins decomposing within 24 to 72 hours after death. But in a shocking twist, the body of Saint Bernadette has remained intact for almost 150 years.
In a time of religious turmoil, a young woman had a vision.
Saw a woman dressed in white with a blue sash and a yellow rose on each foot,
Leaving both scientists and the church in shock. But who is the mysterious saint behind the story, and why has her body remained intact for decades? Join us as we reveal the mysteries of Bernadette's preserved body. Still, before we reveal all of that, it is essential to discuss some interesting facts about the life of Saint Bernadette. The life of Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. Bernadette Soubirous was the eldest daughter of a miller from Lourdes in France. She is best known for her spiritual encounters with a young lady.
She turned to see what had caused the stir. She spied a beautiful young woman, clothed in white, and with a yellow rose on each of her feet,
Who requested a chapel be built at a nearby cave grotto. These apparitions occurred between February and July 1858. According to Bernadette, the young lady that appeared identified herself as the Immaculate Conception. This triggered a series of investigations by the French Catholic Church, and what happened next has shocked people for centuries. After a canonical investigation, Soubirous's accounts were deemed worthy of belief in 1862. The Marian apparition became known as Our Lady of Lourdes. In 1866, Soubirous joined the Sisters of Charity of Nevers at their convent in Nevers, where she spent her final years. The Catholic Church believes her body remains internally incorrupt, but we'll get back to that. The Grotto of the Apparitions has since become an important pilgrimage site.
The people who are visiting there now, they're online to go behind into the grotto to see where that miraculous spring of water comes up. So it's a place of devotion. I've mentioned that St. Bernadette saw the grotto as her heaven.
And the Marian Shrine, the sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes, attracts approximately 5 million pilgrims of various denominations annually. Pope Pius X beatified Bernadette Soubirous on June 14, 1925, and canonized her 8 years later. But the story of Saint Bernadette is not all rosy. France was facing a period of hardship, and her family experienced extreme poverty when she was born. Historical records show that she was a frail child, likely due to persistent illness, and she managed to reach a height of only 1.4 meters or 4 feet 7 inches. She contracted cholera as a toddler and endured severe asthma throughout her life. Bernadette attended the day school run by the Sisters of Charity and Christian Instruction of Nevers. Contrary to popular Hollywood depictions, Soubirous had limited French language skills, only beginning formal French studies at age 13. Her frequent illnesses hindered her ability to read and write. She primarily spoke Occitan, the language of the local Pyrenees region. The Soubirous family had fallen into severe financial and social hardship by the time the events at the grotto unfolded. They lived in a single-room basement known as Le Cachet, or the dungeon.
I'm standing in front of Le Cachot, which means a dungeon or a prison, because it had been used as a jail, but it was a miserable place. And when poor Bernadette and her family had nowhere else to go, they ended up in here.
Which had previously served as a jail. The family could stay rent-free thanks to the generosity of André Sajou, a cousin of Bernadette's mother. This cramped and dismal space was like a reflection of their poverty, as they struggled to survive in harsh conditions, dependent on the kindness of relatives. Their situation demonstrated the stark difference between Bernadette's humble beginnings and the extraordinary experiences ahead. Keep waiting to discover how her story turned around. Saint Bernadette's Visions at the Grotto. On February 11, 1858, Saint Bernadette gathered firewood with her sister Toinette and a friend near the Massabielle Grotto when she had her first vision. While the others crossed a stream, Bernadette stayed behind to remove her shoes and stockings. She heard a rushing wind as she sat and noticed a moving wild rose. From a nearby alcove, a dazzling light appeared, revealing a white figure. This was the first of 18 visions of Aquero, or that one.
The Virgin Mary appeared to 14-year-old Bernadette Subiru 18 times in this small town at the foot of the southern French,
later described as a small young lady. Her companions claimed to have seen nothing. On February 14th, Bernadette returned to the grotto with her sister Marie and friends, seeing the apparition again. The vision vanished when holy water was thrown and a rock was hurled. On February 18th, the vision instructed Bernadette to return to the grotto daily for a fortnight. This period of nearly daily visions became known as La Quinzaine Sacrée, or Holy Fortnight. Saint Bernadette's parents, particularly her mother, were embarrassed and tried to prevent her from going. The supposed visions remained very disturbing until the 17th vision. While the townspeople who believed her story assumed she saw the Virgin Mary, Bernadette never explicitly claimed it was Mary. Instead, she consistently referred to Aquero. She described the lady wearing a white veil, a blue girdle, and yellow roses on her feet, a description compatible with statues of the Virgin Mary in village churches. Bernadette's story caused a sensation among the townspeople, dividing them into believers and skeptics.
Finally spoke and announced that she is the Immaculate Conception. So it's just an amazing story of that process and the doubters and the believers, and how the truth finally won in the end.
Some believed she suffered from a mental illness and demanded she be locked in a mental health facility. The content of Saint Bernadette's visions was straightforward, emphasizing prayer and penance. In late February 1858, she claimed a new vision instructed her to drink, wash, and eat the herb from the grotto's spring as penance, and that was when something happened that left the whole town speechless. You are about to witness something genuinely unbelievable. Surprisingly, the grotto's muddy water had become clear the next day. This water had been muddy for hundreds of years. On March 2nd, during the 13th apparition, Saint Bernadette reported that the lady requested a chapel and procession. The 16th vision, which lasted over an hour, occurred on March 25th. Subirus asked the woman's name 3 times, finally hearing the response, "I am the Immaculate Conception," in Gascon Occitan.
The lady looked at her with a serious expression, and her voice trembling with emotion. She said, "I am the Immaculate Conception."
Despite rigorous questioning by church and government officials, Bernadette remained steadfast in her account. In April, Saint Bernadette experienced another vision, during which her hand was unharmed after being held in a candle flame for several minutes. In June 1858, the mayor of Lourdes barricaded the grotto and posted guards to prevent public access. Saint Bernadette's 18th and final apparition occurred on July 16th, when she viewed the grotto from across the river. Similar to the 1917 Fatima apparitions in Portugal, the initial description of the entity by Saint Bernadette gradually evolved to align with a familiar icon of Mary. She originally described the apparition as a small, childlike figure, a jeune fille, who was later interpreted as a lady of teenage or even 20 years old. A statue was later erected to represent the lady appearing to Saint Bernadette in her vision. She complained that it failed to capture the youthful beauty of the actual lady. In her own words, the statue was too big, too old. Miracles at the grotto and unwanted attention. Following an investigation, Catholic Church authorities validated the authenticity of the apparitions in 1862. In the 160 years since Saint Bernadette recommended the spring, it has brought 70 cures, which the Lourdes Medical Bureau confirmed as inexplicable.
Now, more than a century and a half later, people have come to this water, and over 7,000 cures have been investigated by the resulting medical bureau.
The Catholic Church also stated that the water and claims have been subject to extremely rigorous scientific and medical examinations that failed to uncover any contrary explanation. The Lourdes Commission, which examined Saint Bernadette's visions, conducted an intensive analysis of the water and discovered that, despite its high mineral content, it contained nothing extraordinary that could account for the attributed cures. Bernadette maintained that faith and prayer were the true healers. One must have faith and pray. The water will have no virtue without faith. Subirus's plea to the local priest to construct a chapel at the vision site eventually led to numerous chapels and churches in Lourdes. The sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes is now one of the world's primary Catholic pilgrimage destinations. One of the churches erected on the site, the Basilica of St. Pius XI, can accommodate 25,000 people and was consecrated by the future Pope John XIII during his tenure as papal nuncio to France. In 2013, 715,000 pilgrims attended pilgrimage events. In 2016, the number reached 570,000, and it continues to grow today. But something began to worry Saint Bernadette. The attention was getting too much. Displeased with the attention she had earned, Bernadette enrolled in the hospice school operated by the Sisters of Charity of Nevers, where she had acquired reading and writing skills. Despite her inclination towards the Carmelites, her health prevented her from joining any of the austere, contemplative orders. On July 29, 1866, alongside 42 other candidates, she joined the Sisters of Charity at their mother house, the St. Gildard Convent in Nevers. Sister Marie-Thérèse Vauzou served as her mistress of novices. The Mother Superior at the time bestowed upon her the name Marie Bernard in honor of her godmother, Bernard. Patricia McEachern states, Bernadette was deeply devoted to Saint Bernard, her patron saint. She diligently copied extensive texts related to him in notebooks and scraps of paper. The transformation into Sister Marie Bernard marked a pivotal moment for Bernadette, as she became acutely aware that the extraordinary grace the Queen of Heaven bestowed upon her came with significant responsibilities. Suberus spent the remainder of her short life at the mother house, serving as an infirmary assistant and later as a sacristan, designing embroidery for altar cloths and vestments. Her contemporaries loved her humility and sacrificial spirit. When asked about the apparitions, she responded, "The Virgin used me as a broom to remove the dust. When the work is done, the broom is put behind the door again." Saint Bernadette followed the transformation of Lourdes into a pilgrimage shrine while living there, but was absent during the consecration of the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in 1876. Sadly, her childhood battles with cholera left her with severe chronic asthma.
Cholera was terrifying. You could lose 20 pounds of body weight via diarrhea in under a day, and depending on the strain, it killed up to half of the people it infected.
And eventually she contracted tuberculosis of the lungs and bones. She could not actively participate in convent life for several months before her death. Sadly, she finally succumbed to her long-term illness at the age of 35 on April 16, 1879. It was Easter Wednesday while reciting the Holy Rosary. On her deathbed, enduring severe pain and following the Virgin Mary's admonition of penance, 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 Saint Bernadette proclaimed, "All this is good for heaven." Her final words were, "Blessed Mary, Mother of God, pray for me." Suberus's body was laid to rest in the St. Joseph Chapel within the grounds of her convent. But the mystery begins here. You cannot miss the revelations. The incorrupt body of Saint Bernadette. In 1909, Bishop Gauthey of Nevers and the Catholic Church exhumed Saint Bernadette's body in the presence of representatives appointed by the cause's postulators, 2 physicians, and a community sister. To their greatest shock, despite the oxidation of the crucifix in her hand and her rosary, her body appeared incorrupt, preserved from decomposition. This was cited as a miracle supporting her eventual canonization into sainthood. They washed and reclothed her body before reburial in the chapel of St. Joseph in a new double casket. But if you think you have seen the biggest miracle today, there's more ahead. The church exhumed the corpse a second time on April 3, 1919, upon the approval of Bernadette's canonization. Dr. Comte, who examined the body, noted, "The body is practically mummified, covered with patches of mildew and quite a notable layer of salts, which appear to be calcium salts. The skin has disappeared in some places, but still exists on most body parts." Once again, the body was returned to the vault of St. Joseph's Chapel. In 1925, the church exhumed the body for a third time. They extracted relics, which were sent to Rome. A precise facial imprint was molded to create a wax mask based on the imprints and genuine photographs intended to be placed on the body. This practice was common for relics in France, as there was concern that the public might perceive the blackish facial tint sunken eyes and nose as signs of corruption. Hand imprints were also taken for the body's presentation.
And the Catholic Church, impressed by her artistic past and her incorruptibility,
and the creation of wax casts. The remains were then encased in a gold and crystal reliquary in the chapel of Saint Bernadette at the main convent church. 3 years later, in 1928, Dr. Comte published a report on Suberus's third exhumation in the second issue of the Bulletin de l'Association Médicale de Notre-Dame de Lourdes. According to the doctor, he was tasked with examining the left side of the thorax to extract ribs as relics and retrieve the heart, which he believed might still be intact. However, accessing the heart without causing visible damage proved difficult with the body resting on its left arm. Additionally, the Mother Superior expressed a desire to keep the heart with the body, and since the bishop did not insist otherwise, the doctor abandoned the idea. Instead, he removed 2 ribs from the right side, which were more accessible. During the examination, he was shocked by the exceptional preservation of the body. The skeleton, muscle tissues, still flexible and firm, ligaments, and skin exhibited remarkable resilience. Additionally, the Mother Superior expressed a desire to keep the heart with the body, and since the bishop did not insist otherwise, the doctor abandoned the idea. Instead, he removed 2 ribs from the right side, which were more accessible. During the examination, he was shocked by the exceptional preservation of the body. The skeleton, muscle tissues, still flexible and firm, ligaments, and skin exhibited remarkable resilience. That is not the most shocking part. The liver, after 46 years, was in exceptional condition. The examiner expected significant deterioration due to its soft texture and propensity for rapid decomposition, or hardening into a chalky substance. Yet when he cut the body open, the liver displayed an almost normal consistency, soft and intact. He told those present that this extraordinary preservation did not appear to be a natural occurrence. Are you wondering whether we can still view Saint Bernadette's body today? The answer will surprise you: yes. In 1970, the convent in Nevers was transformed into a pilgrimage center dedicated to Saint Bernadette. It is managed by volunteers and a few sisters, and is known as Espace Bernadette Suberus Nevers. In the spring of 2015, Lourdes requested that Saint Bernadette's remains be returned to Lourdes, a move opposed by the city of Nevers. The sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes contains a few bodily relics of Saint Bernadette, which have been taken on tour across various European dioceses from 2017 onwards for public veneration. In 2019, a new reliquary was constructed for the Relics travels. In 2022, the reliquary visited the United States and the United Kingdom. The Relics first toured the United States from April to August 2022, visiting approximately 30 dioceses.
Crowded Catholic church with people spilling out onto the sidewalk and even more packing the nearby parish hall. It's a cold evening in the middle of a work week, but they've flocked to St. James Church in Northern Virginia to see a unique exhibit.
In September and October 2022, the relics were displayed in around 50 locations in England, Scotland, and Wales, including Westminster Cathedral and Carfin Lourdes Grotto. For a body to be considered incorrupt, it must be immune to the natural forces without the aid of processes like embalming. It's important to note that a body doesn't have to avoid decay indefinitely to be considered incorrupt. It merely needs to show some supernatural preservation at some point in its history. Most incorrupt bodies held by the Catholic Church today, including Saint Bernadette, have undergone artificial enhancements to maintain their aesthetic appeal and appearance. In total, the Catholic Church has approximately 100 incorrupt bodies. Most of these are housed in Italy, with some also located in countries like Poland, Belgium, Austria, Germany, and India. Pope Francis addressed people on Easter to share his feelings and opinions on specific topics. As you know, Easter Sunday is a special day for Christians because they believe it's when Jesus came back to life after dying on the cross. While addressing them, Pope Francis talked about how God is always with us, but he also said some surprising things about Jesus. What's not surprising is that this wasn't the first time he said something that didn't quite sit well with the public. He is quite notorious for often saying things that make traditional Catholics uncomfortable. But this time, even his supporters, Orthodox Catholics and critics, were taken aback by what he said. He boldly made some revelations about Jesus' death that no one knew about or had ever heard before. It made many people question what they've always believed about Jesus. Before we get into all of that, first, we need to look at how Pope Francis leads the Catholic Church. And I must tell you that he leads it in a very unusual way. From growing up in Buenos Aires to becoming a world-renowned priest, Pope Francis was known for his simple way of life and care for the poor and marginalized. Instead of living in the fancy apostolic palace like previous popes, Pope Francis chose to live in the much simpler Vatican guest house. He also dressed very modestly, showing that he didn't want a lot of wealth and luxury. During his time as Pope, Pope Francis talked about important values like kindness, including everyone, and protecting the environment. He believed that the Church should welcome everyone, no matter where they come from or what their situation is. Pope Francis even tried to connect with people from other religions, not just Catholics, to help everyone understand each other better. For a religion that some think of as only for certain people, Pope Francis's way of accepting everyone was controversial to some more traditional Catholics. Pope Francis tried hard to keep the crucial beliefs of the Church while also making changes to fit the modern world better. He cared a lot about helping people who didn't have much and spoke up for them. Pope Francis once said that some of the happiest people are those who don't have much, but his new ways of looking at things also caused some arguments about whether the Church should stick to its old beliefs or change to fit in with the world today. While many people liked Pope Francis's changes to the Catholic Church, not everyone was happy with his new ideas about the Bible and Jesus. Some people committed to the old Catholic beliefs didn't like the changes, but it seems like some of the arguments have calmed down after his latest talk about Jesus. Before we talk about the teachings that seem to calm things down in the Catholic Church, let's understand why there's been some controversy around Pope Francis, his teachings, and his way of leading. Trying to keep the important beliefs of the Catholic Church while also making old teachings fit in with modern life has been a big challenge for Pope Francis. Instead of only following the exact words written down, Pope Francis wants Catholics to think deeper about the stories in the Bible. He says these stories have deeper meanings that can teach us valuable things about life today. For example, Pope Francis says the story of how the world was created in the book of Genesis.
In the beginning there was darkness, and then there was light. Experience the awe-inspiring tale of creation as told in the book of Genesis.
Is not just about how things began. He thinks it's a powerful story that teaches us about our special connection with God and our responsibility to care for the earth. Looking at the Bible this way makes its teachings more meaningful for our lives now, but not everyone agrees with Pope Francis. Some people, called conservatives, think the Bible should be understood exactly as it's written, without thinking about its deeper meanings. They worry that looking deeper into the Bible's stories might change the fundamental beliefs of the Church. On the other hand, people who support Pope Francis think that understanding the deeper meanings of the Bible's stories can make its teachings even better and more relevant for today's world. Before we proceed, you need to know some of the Pope's most controversial interpretations of the Bible. Some of them will shock you. What are the Pope's most controversial teachings that have actually divided the Catholic Church? The Pope is known for saying things that make people talk. Some of his statements are quite all right in the Christian faith, but some cause big discussions and make people question his faith, and weirdly, whether he'll go to heaven. Recently, the Pope said something specifically for LGBTQ Catholics. It's the first time there's been any talk about blessing same-sex couples.
Catholic priests can now bless same-sex couples. Pope Francis formally changed Vatican policy today,
Which, knowing the common religious aversion to the topic, is a huge deal. Some people even want to remove him from being the Pope because of this. To understand why, let's look at some of the things he said. Some years ago, there were reports that Pope Francis said something strange. He reportedly said that humans could disappear, and God would make new species. This came from an interview in an Italian newspaper with a friend of the Pope, Eugenio Scalfari, who is an atheist. In another interview, Scalfari reminded the Pope about this and asked about what happens to bad people who go to hell. He wondered if their souls would suffer forever. In response, Pope Francis reportedly said that people who feel sorry for what they did and ask God for forgiveness won't be punished. Instead, they'll be forgiven and can be with God. But those who don't feel sorry and can't be forgiven will stop existing, according to the Pope. He doesn't believe in hell. Instead, he thinks that souls who do bad things just disappear. After this interview, the Vatican quickly said that what Scalfari wrote wasn't exactly what the Pope said. They said the words weren't written down right, so we shouldn't consider them exactly what the Pope thinks. Even though the Vatican said this, there was still some arguing about the interview. First, they put it in their newspaper and website, then took it off, and then put it back again before finally taking it off for good. This, of course, caused a lot of confusion. Some people connected what Scalfari wrote to something the Pope wrote in a book called Amoris Laetitia. In that book, the Pope said nobody should be punished forever because that's not what the Bible says. This made some people think that maybe the Pope has different ideas about hell. In another interview in 2015, Pope Francis seemed to say that even though nobody goes to hell forever, people who don't want to be with God might just stop existing after they die. So, even though the Vatican said Scalfari got it wrong, there's still some confusion about what the Pope really thinks about hell. That's not all. Pope Francis has also said things that seem different from what the Church has always taught about the world's top problems. In 2013, Pope Francis did another interview where he said the biggest issues in the world right now are young people not having jobs and older people feeling lonely. You wouldn't expect the Pope to say these are the most severe problems. Then, he reportedly said that trying to make people become Catholics doesn't make sense and is silly. This goes against what the Bible says about telling everyone about Jesus. Even more surprising, the Pope allegedly said that there is no particular Catholic God, only God. This seems to go against the idea that Catholicism is the only true religion. Many Catholics were confused and upset by what the Pope reportedly said. Maybe the Pope didn't fully believe in some of the major parts of Catholicism. Some people thought perhaps he has a different, more general view of spirituality that isn't strictly Catholic. And if that's true, not many will be surprised. Continuing with his beliefs, the Pope received more criticism in 2016. Now remember, he always says that abortion is very wrong, but his focus on being kind and forgiving has caused arguments. In 2016, during the Special Mercy Year, the Pope said that priests could forgive women who had abortions.
Making another dent in his progressive image, the Pope went off script in his weekly address to the faithful gathered on St. Peter's Square to deliver his strongest criticism yet of abortion.
Some people liked this idea, but others didn't. Now let's discuss what the Pope thinks about money and how the world works. He didn't hold back when talking about capitalism. He said it's not suitable for poor people. He even said caring too much about money, cars, and phones takes people away from God. He said the world needs to be more fair for everyone, with rich and poor people having more equal lives. These words made people who care about fairness very happy, but some said the Pope was talking too much about socialist ideas. One of his most surprising moves was when he said that he was totally against the death penalty. In 2018, Pope Francis said that the death penalty is always wrong, no matter what. This was a major change for the Catholic Church, which before said it was okay in some situations, but not everyone liked what the Pope said. Many people, both inside and outside the Church, criticized him for it. Some high-ranking Catholic scholars were really unhappy with him. They thought he was going against important Catholic beliefs. So they, along with some priests, wrote a letter saying that the Pope was going against the Church's teachings. This letter was published on April 30th on the website LifeSite News. In the letter, they said that Pope Francis was preaching differently from Catholic teachings about marriage, sex, and forgiveness. They said this was the third time they had to talk about this. First, in 2016, they wrote a letter to top Catholic leaders, saying that the Pope was teaching the wrong things. Then, in 2017, they said the Pope was teaching 7 things that were against Catholic beliefs, but they didn't call it heresy. But in 2018, they said that what the Pope was teaching was definitely heresy. That's not even half of it. They also said that the Pope doesn't feel sorry for his actions. The letter said the bishops should say that the Pope is guilty of heresy and punish him. They said that he should be removed from his position as the leader of the Catholic Church. 19 well-known Catholics signed this letter, including Aidan Nichols, a founder of the Dominican Order, law professor Brian McCall, and scholar Anna Silvas. Within 12 hours, more than 1,500 other people added their names to an online petition supporting what the letter said about the Pope. The letter pointed to things the Pope said and did that go against what the Catholic Church teaches. They also talked about the Pope saying that divorced and remarried Catholics can take communion, even though the Catholic Church says marriage should last forever. The letter said the Pope was changing important Catholic beliefs about right and wrong. They said he was making people think that what's right and wrong depends on each person instead of having clear rules from the Church. The supporters of the letters didn't just do this. For their hands, it got more serious. What do recent supporters of the letter now have to say? Supporters of the letter said they were bravely defending the common Catholic beliefs from changes by Pope Francis that they think are wrong and could confuse people, but critics said it was unfair to attack the Pope's authority. But here's the thing. Pope Francis's ideas aren't new. They're part of a bigger revolution in the Catholic Church that started after the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. During this time, the Church began looking at the Bible in new ways. They used history and culture to understand what the Bible really means. This way of looking at the Bible has led to different, more detailed ideas about what it teaches. But this change has caused a big argument. Even now, some people, called conservatives, are still claiming Pope Francis is changing the Catholic Church's beliefs to fit in with what people think now. They didn't like it when, in 2019, there was talk about letting married men become priests in some places. They also didn't like it when Catholic priests were allowed to bless same-sex couples. This argument is really about whether the Church's beliefs should always stay the same, or if they can change as the world changes. Traditionalists, who want to keep things the same, say that Pope Francis is making the Church's beliefs less important by changing them. But Pope Francis's supporters say that the Church's beliefs can change to fit in with what's happening now. They say that this makes the Church's beliefs more meaningful for people today. They think that by changing, the Church can still be a guide for people, even as the world changes. How the Pope looks at the Bible challenges Catholics to live out the essential beliefs of their faith. He says that we should follow Jesus' example of loving everyone and treating them with respect. He wants us to understand the Bible in a way that makes us want to be better people. His teachings tell us to balance following old traditions and living in the modern world. He wants our faith to be something we practice every day, not just something we believe. Even though some people didn't like what the Pope said before, his recent ideas about Jesus surprised everyone, even his critics. So what did the Pope say about Jesus that was so surprising? He didn't just talk about new ways to understand the Bible. He also said we should act with kindness and love, just like Jesus did. He says that Jesus cared a lot about poor and struggling people and that we should too. During that time, Jesus wasn't some distant figure. He was deeply connected to the struggles of ordinary people. He experienced firsthand the oppression and unfairness under the brutal Roman occupation. He used this perspective to urge Christians to follow his example by reaching out to help and understand those around them, especially those less fortunate. We can see practical examples of this in the shocking revelations made by Pope Francis about the true nature of Jesus Christ on two very noticeable occasions. And the first eye-opening moment happened when the Pope visited a correctional center. Despite just recovering, he went straight to presiding over Mass and washing the feet of 12 young inmates from various backgrounds, nationalities, races, and faiths, including Islam and even 2 women. As he performed this powerful foot-washing ritual, Pope Francis gave a significant sermon.
This was the setting for Pope Francis to preside over the Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday. The Pope reflected on Jesus washing the feet of his disciples and Judas's betrayal, and he stressed that nothing is beyond forgiveness.
He began by explaining that foot washing isn't just an old tradition, but a gesture showing how we are to be with one another, caring for each other. But then, the Pope took it to another level entirely. He plainly said it's hard to see so much injustice in the world, with people taking advantage of others, people trapped with no way out, and many broken families. Pope Francis said that if anyone has avoided such hardship, it's not because they're better, but because of God's grace. Here's where it gets more interesting, though. Looking those inmates in the eye, the Pope stated that everyone can slip, each one of us. And this awareness that we can all slip gives us the dignity of being sinners, and Jesus wants us that way. That's why he tried to wash our feet, to save and serve us. The Pope backed this up by quoting Jesus, saying that if we listened to his lessons, life would be wonderful because we'd rush to help each other instead of taking advantage, like the unwise teacher. Pope Francis preached that helping others and lending a hand comes from a noble heart, and Jesus today wants to teach us this nobility of heart. But he went even further, getting extremely personal and relatable. He said we might think if the Pope knew our inner flaws, but Jesus literally knows everything already and loves us as we are. Then, he said something even more kind. He said that Jesus is never frightened by our weaknesses. He already paid for our sins. He only wants to accompany us, to take our hand, so life will not be so hard. Basically, the Pope is saying that Jesus isn't shocked by our failures and doesn't judge us. He simply wants to walk beside us, ease our burdens, and love us unconditionally in our imperfect state. Whether religious or not, you must admit these are some of the most uplifting, inclusive teachings about embracing our shared flaws while striving for goodness. Pope Francis enjoys preaching the dignity of our imperfections and Jesus' boundless love for us all, exactly as we are. Those were the most shocking truths that'll last for ages to come. No wonder jaws were left on the floor after the Holy Father dropped such wisdom. As if that wasn't enough, during a recent Mass at the famous St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis just doubled down on his shocking revelations about the true spirit of Christianity and how we need to view one another. Speaking to the massive crowd, the Pope preached that Christians must pray for the ability to look at others with the same boundless mercy and caring that Jesus looks at every single one of us. Not mincing words, he plainly stated that no one is perfect. We all sin and make mistakes. If the Lord judged solely on our weaknesses, nobody could be saved. Expounding on that, he referenced the Gospel of John, showing how God did not send his Son to condemn the world, so it might be saved through him. In that light, we must see each other with compassion and understanding, just as Jesus sees us. He said something worth thinking about. When Jesus met people in the Gospels, he saw their authentic selves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As he put it, there were no secrets before him. He could read their hearts. But here's the main point. Jesus wasn't looking to shame or cast harsh judgment. The Pope said Jesus saw the whole person, not to point fingers, but to embrace our lives, free us from sin, and save us. Pope Francis stressed that Jesus has no interest in putting us on trial or condemning us. Instead, he wants none of us to be lost. The Pope then described the Lord's view of us as the gentle glimmer of a lamp that allows us to see the good in ourselves while still recognizing our flaws and mistakes so we can grow with his grace. But right after Pope Francis, he got real. He admitted how often we failed to treat each other with that same compassionate, merciful lens. In his words, we frequently condemn others, speaking badly and gossiping against them. He then said that we ask the Lord to give us this merciful gaze, to look at others as he looks at us. For Pope Francis, being a Christian means more than just attending church. It's about living out the values of the gospel in our daily lives, showing kindness and solidarity with those in need through charity, service, and empathy. According to him, faith demands rolling our sleeves to challenge injustice and encourage human dignity. Always remember that the gospel's power is not in philosophical ideals, but in unleashing it as a life-changing force for personal and social transformation. What do you think about Pope Francis's thoughts on Jesus' death? Do you think he is right? And which of his other opinions on specific topics, which we revealed, shocked you the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We would love to know. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content like this.